Welcome to the pre-proposal conference for the One Acquisition Solution for Integrated Services Plus, also known as OASIS Plus. This conference is held in conjunction with the release of the final request for proposals for the OASIS Plus program on June 15, 2023, and is hosted by GSA's Office of Professional Services and Human Capital categories. OASIS Plus is a government-wide, multiple award, indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity acquisition program designed to address government agencies' mission needs for a full range of service requirements that integrate multiple service disciplines and ancillary services and products. OASIS Plus provides flexibility for commercial and non-commercial requirements as well as all contract types in order to achieve a total solution. In this pre-proposal conference, we will be introducing key personnel, providing a brief overview of the OASIS Plus program, and discussing the timeline of important dates. We will then detail the proposal instructions in Section L of the RFP, as well as the evaluation factors for award in Section M before offering closing remarks. Before I move forward, I would like to point out that information in this presentation is consistent with the issued solicitation and is intended to aid in your understanding as you prepare your proposal. This pre-proposal conference is not a substitute for your complete review of the solicitation documents and any subsequent amendments. While we intend to highlight the important sections, it is not possible to discuss every term and condition in the solicitation and contract. For the purposes of this presentation, we will be primarily focusing on the proposal submission instructions and evaluation factors. Let's start with the introductions of key personnel within the OASIS Plus program. First and foremost, the Assistant Commissioner of the Office of Professional Services and Human Capital categories and Head of the Contracting Activity is Tiffany Hickson. The OASIS Plus Program Manager is Susan Wallace. My name is Valerie Aids, and I am the Women-Owned Small Business Hub Zone and Service-Disabled Veteran-Owned Small Business Contracting Officer. I am joined today by my colleagues, Josh Houseworth, who is the OASIS Plus Small Business CO, and Shelba Young, who is the Unrestricted and 8A Small Business CO. The Assistant Commissioner of the Office of Policy and Compliance is Mark Lee, and the Senior Procurement Executive is Jeff Koses. Please keep in mind that the OASIS Plus COs listed here are the sole point of contact for all questions under the solicitation. Only the CO has authority to direct changes to the solicitation requirements. The OASIS Plus family of contract programs includes 6 contract vehicles, 2 of which are the Unrestricted IDIQ and the Small Business Set-Aside, and 4 that are Socioeconomic Small Business Set-Asides, the 8A HUD Zone, Service-Disabled Veteran-Owned, and Women-Owned IDIQs. Each of these individual master contracts contains shared terms and conditions with some specific terms and conditions that are unique to a contractor's socioeconomic status. Please refer to the individual contract programs RFP for qualifications required for each socioeconomic program. Later in this presentation, we will highlight some specific proposal requirements that may be unique to the unrestricted small business and socioeconomic vehicles. Some of the unique features of the OASIS Plus program include a flexible and expandable domain-based structure, worldwide access to commercial and non-commercial services, and the ability to use any contract type, no contract ceiling amount or maximum number of awards, practical technology-based ordering and market research tools, an industrial base of highly qualified offers, and a 10-year ordering period with a base term of 5 years and 1 5-year option. In addition, GSA anticipates conducting frequent on-ramps with the goal of being continuously open so prospective offerers who are unable to get an award during this initial period will have additional opportunities. Existing OASIS Plus contractors will also be able to submit proposals for any of the other OASIS Plus IDIQs for which they are eligible through lateral springboarding. Another unique feature not listed here is domain enhancement, which will provide existing OASIS Plus contractors with the opportunity to add domains for which they become eligible and that they don't already hold under their awarded active contract. Finally, price evaluation will be conducted at the master contract level, but will only be used in limited instances, since task order prices will be based on the individual requirements solicited under OASIS Plus. The goal is to establish a robust industry base to leverage competition at the task order level. At this time, OASIS Plus includes 7 domains, which are functional groupings of related services spanning multiple NAICS codes: management and advisory, intelligence, facilities, research and development, technical and engineering, environmental, and logistics. A NAICS domain, Enterprise Solutions, is only included in the unrestricted contract and therefore not available for use within the OASIS Plus Small Business and Socioeconomic Set-asides. The domains in dark blue on the slide are already part of the current predecessor OASIS contract. Facility services comes to us from the Building Maintenance and Operations contract vehicle, while intelligence services, environmental services, and enterprise solutions are part of the expanded scope of OASIS Plus. GSA may also introduce new domains at its discretion during the life of the contract. Domains anticipated to be included in future phases may include, but are not limited to, financial services, business administration, human capital, marketing and public relations, and social services. Each domain is limited to the NAICS codes listed under that particular domain. The NAICS codes will become the awarded line items or clans on each contract and represent the fair opportunity pools in which the awardee may compete at the task order level. Contract holders will be eligible to compete within all their awarded domain clans. Fair opportunity will also be managed in the OSP, which will be the mandatory system for task order solicitation. Within the small business and socioeconomic set-asides, the awardee will only be included in and allowed to compete under the clans on which they represented as a small business concern for the corresponding size standard and are otherwise eligible under the socioeconomic vehicle. On this slide, we have noted some important dates to remember as you prepare your proposal submission. Please keep in mind that these dates are subject to change and any updates will be made available on SAM.gov. All of the RFPs have been released as of June 15, 2023, with a 90-day proposal submission period. As of the date of this recording, the deadline for submission is 4 p.m. on September 13, 2023. Industry is welcome to submit questions regarding the solicitation until 4 p.m. Eastern on July 6, 2023. Offerors are instructed to read the entire solicitation document, including all attachments, prior to submitting questions. Any questions or comments regarding the solicitation must be submitted using the OASIS Plus submission portal, also called the OSP or Symphony. Questions submitted by email or any other means besides the OSP will not be answered. GSA reserves the right to publicly discuss and publish or simply consider questions and comments. Any answered questions will be made available to industry. The OASIS Plus team expects to complete proposal evaluations and make awards in fiscal year 2024, with an expected OASIS Plus performance start date at the beginning of fiscal year 2025. I want to stress again that we will be primarily focusing this presentation on the proposal submission instructions and evaluation factors, so this pre-proposal conference should not be a replacement for your thorough review of the RFP documents. These are just a few of the items from Section L3 of the RFP that we want to bring to your attention. First, the OSP is a web-based software application that the government intends to use for OASIS Plus proposal submission, evaluation, and contract management. Training will also be provided to contractors regarding the use of the OSP for proposal submission and post-award requirements. Please keep in mind that the OSP training has not yet been released, but will be released soon, and will provide an update as that happens. The electronic submission documents and subsequent amendments posted to SAM.gov are the official documents for this solicitation. If there is a discrepancy between the documents posted to SAM.gov and the OSP, the most current documents posted on SAM.gov take precedence. We also understand that considerable time and effort goes into proposal submission. However, the government will not reimburse offers for any cost incurred for the preparation and submission of proposals in response to the solicitation. Next, I would like to turn your attention to the different subsections regarding proposal contents at Section L5 of the RFP. It should be noted that the requirements in Section L5.1, General, L5.7, Cost Price, and L5.8, Responsibility, will not receive evaluation credits in accordance with the scoring table at Section M7. However, they are required to be submitted with the proposals. The other items in this list, as identified in sections L5(2) through 6, include experience, systems, rates and clearances, other certifications, and past performance, and are not mandatory elements. However, offerors who demonstrate having these qualifications within their proposal will receive evaluation credits in accordance with section M7. Now I'm going to turn it over to Josh to discuss the proposal instructions at section L in more detail.
Thanks, Valerie. Getting right into the meat and potatoes of the OASIS Plus RFP, we look at section L5(1), which details the general submission requirements for an OASIS Plus proposal. This starts with the standard form 33, which is the solicitation, offer, and award form. I'm including section references here where you can find the instructions on how to fill it out. Sections L5131 and L5132 discuss requirements for contractor teaming arrangements, which we will discuss further on the next slide. Similar to teaming arrangements, offers within a corporate structure may utilize resources from a parent company, affiliate, division, and/or subsidiary. If this is something you plan to do, ensure you review section L514 and comply with the requirements therein. Within the OSP, offers will complete all required reps inserts as prescribed in section K, in addition to providing a copy of the annual reps inserts completed electronically within SAM.gov. Within the OSP, offers shall select the domains and OASIS Plus solicitations, for example, small business, 8A, hub zone, etc., for which they would like to submit an offer. Offers will be assigned a NAICS code based on their proposed domains. And note the methodology for this assignment is unique for small business and unrestricted, so I recommend reviewing this section for more information. And there may be some confusion why we've taken a unique approach with NAICS codes. And the answer is that there is currently a limitation with FPDS that only one NAICS code can be assigned and reported with each contract action. So this singular NAICS code called the primary NAICS code will be assigned to your contract. This approach will ensure contractors are competing against like-sized companies and ordering contracting officers will get credit for their small business awards. For administrative purposes only, the OASIS Plus solicitation is assigned a single NAICS code 541990, which represents the preponderant scope of the OASIS Plus program as a whole. In order to receive credit for each qualifying project and federal experience project, offers shall submit supporting documentation to substantiate each claim. All project verification documents shall be submitted with each respective project. Within section L517 and its subsections, you will find different methods to substantiate project experience based on the type of project and unique situation. Allowable types of verification may differ based on this section, so offers are recommended to review the paragraph titled Verification that can be found within each qualifying project and federal experience project section. As we look at subcontracting plan applicability, this is required for all offers on OASIS Plus unrestricted that are other than small business for any NAICS code within their proposed domains. You can either submit an individual plan, which is preferred, or you may submit a commercial plan. Master subcontracting plans will not be accepted. These plans will establish post-award subcontracting goals, and contractors shall make good faith efforts to meet or exceed the goals for each reporting period. Teaming is not a requirement for any OASIS Plus offer, but if you should choose to make the decision to submit your proposal as a contractor teaming arrangement, such as a joint venture or with proposed subcontractors or a combination of both, there are some additional requirements you should be aware of. Section L5131 talks about the requirements for joint ventures, while section L5132 does the same for proposed subcontractors. There are a number of statutes and regulations which apply to teaming arrangements as well. For mentor protege joint ventures, we made some recent changes that offers should be aware of. Specifically, qualifying projects and federal experience projects submitted in the name of the protege must only meet 50% of the minimum average annual value specified within the scorecard. This 50% reduction also applies to the qualifying project scale threshold that we'll discuss later. And just to note that you may hear scorecard used interchangeably with domain qualification matrix throughout this presentation. For offers from mentor protege joint ventures, a minimum of one relevant qualifying project also must be submitted from the protege or the offering mentor-protege joint venture. We've also slightly amended attachment JP7, joint venture work and qualifications. All joint venture offers must complete and submit this attachment. One recent change is the inclusion of language acknowledging the post-award requirements at section H22, which applies to OASIS Plus task order solicitations. I'd like to highlight some key teaming distinctions across the small business, socioeconomic, and unrestricted RFPs. For the small business and socioeconomic RFPs, offers may claim credit for team member experience and qualifications. However, offers will only be awarded those domain CLINs in which all joint venture members and/or the proposed small business subcontractors represent as small businesses under the associated size standards, or qualify as a small business under one of the exceptions to affiliation. For the OASIS Plus socioeconomic RFPs, there's also a unique qualifying project submission requirement that we'll discuss in just a bit. For the unrestricted RFP, similar to the small business and socioeconomic RFPs, offers may still claim credit for team member experience and qualifications. The offer will be awarded all domain CLINs in which the offer proposes and qualifies for. There's no business size requirement here for the unrestricted RFP. If proposing as a contractor teaming arrangement or CTA, pay close attention to each of these sections to ensure you're submitting the appropriate documentation and understand the additional requirements for CTAs. As we move forward from the general section, we find ourselves at section L52, which discusses qualifying projects or QPs. And similar to relevant experience projects and other MACs and GUACs, QPs allow offers to demonstrate project experience as part of their OASIS Plus proposal. They can either be relevant to the proposed domain or non-relevant to the proposed domain. So what types of projects are allowed as QPs under OASIS Plus? We establish a number of requirements for a project to be eligible as a QP and list a number of different project or contract types on this slide and in section L521. Importantly, these contracts or orders must be for services. They must also meet or exceed a minimum average annual value specified within the scorecards for each proposed domain. We also establish recency requirements for these projects and state that they must be ongoing with at least 6 months of completed performance or completed within 5 years from the date of RFP issuance. There's no minimum period of performance for completed projects. And finally, QPs cannot have an associated record of negative past performance. So for example, on a 5-point scale, if project has an average past performance score of less than 3. See sections L56 and M56 for more details. As I alluded to earlier, one important note for the OASIS Plus socioeconomic RFPs is that a minimum of 2 QPs must be from a member similarly situated to the set-aside. So what do I mean by this? Well, here's an example from the OASIS Plus 8A RFP. For award under the OASIS Plus 8A IDIQ, a minimum of 2 QPs must be from a SBA certified 8A small business concern. The submitted QPs can be from an 8A member of the joint venture, the offering 8A joint venture itself, or a proposed 8A subcontractor, as described in the section L5131. And you may be wondering how this affects you. Well, if you're not teaming, this isn't something you need to worry about because you'd be submitting all of the projects as part of your proposal package. But if you're submitting team member qualifications or qualifications through a meaningful relationship commitment letter, this is something you should consider when building your proposal package. For each qualifying project you submit, there are opportunities unique to each scorecard that can gain you credit. And one thing I want to state early, it is the offeror's responsibility to ensure they provide the documentation to support their claimed credits. For example, you can get credit from submitting a qualifying project if it is relevant to the scope of the proposed domain. And this is actually where a lot of the credits can be obtained from most domains. A paragraph titled Verification, which details the acceptable documentation you may submit to demonstrate each qualification. Keeping with relevance, there are a lot of ways you can demonstrate a project is relevant to the scope of the proposed domain. The easiest of these is through automatic relevance consideration. In attachment JP4, you will find a list of auto-relevant NAICS or PSC codes. If your QP has an assigned PSC or project-specific NAICS code that matches one of the codes for the proposed domain, it will be considered automatically relevant. If your QP does not have a code that matches one of these, you can submit a number of different document types that describe the general scope, nature, complexity, and purpose of the services under the contract. The offer must tag these specific sections in the contract documentation that support a relevance determination. Verification can also be accomplished by using attachment JP3, which is the project verification form. This form allows customer verification if the contract documentation alone cannot demonstrate a particular claim. Now, while you can use the solicitation attachment of this form, it will likely be much easier and straightforward to use the project verification form generated through Symphony. This will generate only the areas you are attempting to claim for a particular project instead of the long list you see in attachment JP3 that represents an exhaustive list of each and every qualification of the scorecard. The important thing to note here is that each domain is unique and tailored to the needs of the customers in that mission space. And while we tried to standardize the scorecards across domains where we could, there are unique aspects to each domain scorecard that should be noted. Later in this presentation, we'll go through an example scorecard and hopefully bring all this together. But taking just a brief look at each of these, QPs can receive credit in a number of areas depending on the domain. The project may receive additional credit for scale by exceeding certain dollar or federal full-time equivalent thresholds. If you see integrated experience in a scorecard, it may receive additional credit for including multiple distinct functional areas or labor categories. For management and staffing, you could get credit for managing multiple subcontractors or staffing personnel with security clearances, or if the project included surge requirements. And certain domains include opportunities to demonstrate specialized functional experience like the environmental or facilities domain. And finally, you'll notice a couple criteria up here that are unique to the enterprise solutions domain, which is only available in the unrestricted RFP. In addition to the QPs submitted under section L522, the offer may submit additional projects called federal experience projects, or FEPs, to demonstrate federal prime contract experience. Only federal prime projects are allowed for submission in this section. Commercial projects or work as a subcontractor is not allowable. The quantity of allowable FEPs varies on a domain-by-domain basis and can be found in attachment JP1 within each scorecard. Federal experience projects are not required to be relevant to the proposed domain and can be applied across your OASIS Plus domain submissions because they're really more of a demonstration of corporate level criteria. This helps offers more easily demonstrate their federal experience across each of the domains they are planning to propose to. To be considered an FEP, each submitted project must meet all of the minimum requirements listed in section L53. Note, this list is very similar to the allowable project types and requirements for qualifying projects with some minor nuances. And similar to QPs, you can get additional credit for FEPs that meet certain requirements, such as an FEP awarded in a competitive multiple award environment. Or if the FEP demonstrates federal experience working with 3 or more federal agencies. And for the R&D domain, you can also receive credit for those FEPs that are cost reimbursement type contracts or meet the criteria for advanced R&D. Now, one thing I'd like to point out here is at section L4, as it relates to both the QPs and FEPs. QPs and FEPs used in more than one proposal in a given domain in OASIS Plus solicitation will be removed from all proposals and will not be evaluated as part of any offer's proposal. It is the offer's sole responsibility to ensure that the projects submitted as part of its proposal are not submitted in any other proposals for the same domain in solicitation. There is a very important exception here, though. Prime contracts and subcontracts are considered unique projects, and both the prime and subcontractor may claim credit for their portion of performance under the submitted project. However, a prime contractor and subcontractor may not claim credit for their performance under the same project as 2 separate QPs and/or FEPs within the same proposal when submitting an offer as a contractor teaming arrangement. In situations where a company submits a project they are not entitled to, for example, company A submits company B's project, only the unauthorized company would be penalized by having the project removed from their proposal. And we've included some examples at section L4 that help to illustrate this restriction. This is one reason why offers should pay close attention if they are a part of multiple teams, as submitting projects on one team could affect the proposal submission on the other. Section L54 details the systems, rates, and clearances that you may receive credit for. Similar to the last 2 sections, none of these are minimum requirements, but you will get additional credit based on each domain and how they've weighted these qualifications. For example, A facility clearance is weighted more heavily in the intelligence domain. Each of these sections includes instructions for how an offeror must provide verification. Similar to section L54, offerors can receive additional credit for certain certifications. This is generally minimal, but does provide an incentive for offers who have these qualifications. If you've been keeping up with prior OASIS Plus draft RFPs, you may have noticed a focus on sustainability. Offers have multiple ways they can demonstrate the sustainability-related criteria, such as public disclosure of Scope 1 and Scope 2 greenhouse gas emissions, the ISO Environmental Management Certification, or the NSF ANSI certification. And just a note here, this is only applicable to the unrestricted RFP. And then finally, for the FedRAMP ATO, this is also only available under the Enterprise Solutions domain. As we move back into the project-related criteria, past performance will be evaluated for relevant QPs submitted under section L522. Non-relevant QPs will not be considered for past performance evaluation under this section, and neither will FEPs. We have provided instructions for how offers shall demonstrate past performance and have included acceptable forms of past performance assessments in sections L561 and L562. When CPAR's information exists, the offeror shall provide a copy of this rating report with its proposal. When CPAR's information doesn't exist, for example, if the government hasn't finalized the CPAR's ratings or if the project is non-federal, the offeror shall submit a past performance survey using the template and attachment JP6. No other format or additional proposal documentation will be considered. The past performance rating form must be completed and signed by either a contracting officer's representative, contracting officer's technical representative, or other government employee with cognizance over the submitted project. For a non-federal project or federal subcontract, the past performance rating form must be completed and signed by a corporate officer or corporate official of the customer with cognizance over the submitted project. If relying on the past performance rating form, offers are advised to complete and submit this attachment as required in the solicitation. As a result of a recent Court of Federal Claims decision, the OASIS Plus acquisition team has determined to include price evaluation as part of the acquisition strategy. As part of each offeror's OASIS Plus proposal, we are requesting pricing on 20 OASIS Plus top labor categories in order to establish ceiling rates for sole source time and material and labor hour contracts. Offers will be required to submit pricing on the same labor categories if they are proposing to one domain or all 8. The reason for this is to set a unified pricing standard across the board that minimizes burden on industry while still achieving our goals of determining price reasonableness. For each labor category, offers will be required to propose direct labor rates and their indirect rates for a total fully burdened price. Only subject matter expert positions for each labor category are required for price proposal submissions. Attachment JP8 provides direct labor rate ranges for each of the 20 labor categories that have been mapped to Bureau of Labor Statistics standard occupational classifications. Offers proposed ceiling rates are to be based on the highest qualified employee within a given labor category, working in the highest paid area within the continental United States on a highly complex requirement, excluding secret, top secret, or SCI, and outside of the continental United States work. This means if you're proposing to multiple domains where that labor category may be applicable, the proposed pricing should reflect the highest ceiling rate among those domains. Offers are also required to submit a basis of estimate, addressing the offer's basis of proposed direct labor rates and each indirect cost rate. Offers are only required to substantiate direct labor rates if they are proposing above the rate ranges in attachment JP8. Failure to substantiate direct labor rates above the high end of the range set forth in attachment JP8 shall result in a determination that the rates are not fair and reasonable and the offeror would not be eligible for award, regardless of their technical score. And just to note that currently price functionality is not in the OSP, but we're going to provide a notice to industry on sam.gov as soon as it's available. And finally, we get to responsibility. As many of you know, the contracting officer must make an affirmative determination of responsibility for each prospective contractor prior to award. In order to facilitate this, offers are required to submit each of these 4 elements with their proposal: the professional employee compensation plan, the uncompensated overtime policy, financial responsibility documentation, and the pre-award evaluation basic safeguarding questionnaire within attachment J3. These are all mandatory submission elements in order to be eligible for award, and they will be evaluated on an acceptable, unacceptable basis. And as I wrap up my portion of this presentation, the thing that I want to get across is every proposal is going to look different. From the domains and IDIQs a company chooses to apply for, to the specific makeup of each proposal, offers have massive flexibility in their proposal content outside of the mandatory submission elements. We did this intentionally to ensure OASIS Plus is populated with a diverse cadre of contractors to meet the wide range of non-IT service requirements across the federal government. Now I'm going to turn it over to Shelby Young, the OASIS Plus Unrestricted Contracting Officer, to go into more details on the OASIS Plus evaluation strategy.
Next, I will be speaking with you about our evaluation strategy. Proposals submitted in response to this solicitation will be awarded credits in accordance with the unique qualification matrices for all proposed multiple award IDIQs. Each domain has a specific qualifications matrix and corresponding qualifying threshold to ensure the highest quality, best-in-class standards are representative of customer needs in that mission space. To receive domain award, the offeror must meet or exceed the domain-specific qualification threshold at Section M7 through the submission requirements in Section L, excluding the minimum mandatory submission requirements detailed in Sections L5.1, L5.7, and L5.8. The offeror has the discretion to use any combination of qualifications detailed in each domain's qualification matrix to achieve the applicable qualifying threshold. Offers that fail to demonstrate a particular qualification will simply not receive credit for that criterion. The government is not limiting the number of contract awards that will result from this solicitation. The basis for awards will be all qualified offers with a fair and reasonable price. Offers will be eligible for award if they meet or exceed the qualification standard for a particular domain and are otherwise determined to be a qualifying offer in accordance with Section M3.1. Cost and price will be determined fair and reasonable in accordance with Section M8. Qualifying thresholds must be met using a combination of project and corporate level criteria. A majority of credit comes from qualifying projects. There are multiple avenues to meet domain qualification standards. There are tailored factors that support a domain's critical mission scope. Offers will be evaluated against an objective standard and qualifying threshold for each proposed domain and will not be evaluated against or compared to other offers. The enterprise solution domain is only available on the unrestricted IDIQ. This domain covers mission critical requirements of at least $250 million. The criteria targets highly qualified, technically capable companies to perform specialized and/or complex services. For the intelligence domain, there are additional credits for cleared facilities and/or personnel. Next is a sample of the small business scorecard for the technical and engineering domain, which you will find in attachment JP-1. Each tab covers a specific domain qualification matrix that provides references to sections L of the RFP, where additional information can be found for each capability or qualification within each domain. It's important to note for the relevance capability, each relevant QP receives evaluation credits. However, for each non-relevant QP, 0 credits will be given for this capability, but you can receive credits under the remaining QPs or capabilities. Non-relevant QPs will allow offers to demonstrate additional qualifications as applicable. For each capability, there is a maximum number of credits, and this will vary for each qualification and domain. The qualification threshold for small business and social economic set-asides has been set at 36 out of the maximum available 50 credits. Here is an example of the unrestricted scorecard for the technical and engineering domain. This is similar to small business scorecard, but there are unique differences such as the maximum number of credits per capability and inclusion of past performance or small business utilization capability, just to name a few. As stated previously, each domain has a specific qualification matrix and corresponding qualifying threshold to ensure the highest quality, best-in-class standards are representative of each customer's needs in that mission space. The qualification threshold for OASIS plus unrestricted has been set at 42 out of the maximum available 50 credits for all domains, with the exception of the enterprise solution domain. The qualification threshold for enterprise solutions has been set at 45 of the available 50 credits. Here's a scorecard tab that has specific qualifying project and federal experience project values for mentor-protege joint venture offers. The QPs and FEPs submitted in the name of the protege partner of a mentor-protege joint venture need only meet 50% of the applicable domain QP and FEP's minimum average annual dollar value and of the qualifying project thresholds for the scale capability. All proposals will be evaluated until they have either been determined eligible for award or rejected for non-conformance to the solicitation requirements. Offers will be eligible for award if they meet or exceed the qualification standard for a particular domain and are otherwise determined to be a qualifying offer in accordance with Section M31. The evaluation team will initially verify the proposal meets all of the acceptability review requirements in Section M5 of the solicitation. Any proposal that fails the acceptability review will be removed from consideration for award, and the offer will be notified in writing as soon as practical. Only proposals that initially pass all the criteria in the acceptability review in accordance with Section M5 shall be considered eligible for award. The evaluation team will evaluate and verify the proposal's supporting documentation for each evaluation element. If the proposal does not meet or exceed the domain qualification threshold, the evaluation for that proposal will stop and the offer will be eliminated from further consideration for award. In closing, offers are highly recommended to review the entire solicitation, including attachments, amendments, published questions, and responses. Offers will want to ensure the proposal is complete, compliant, and provides verification for claim scoring elements. Questions regarding OSP, such as access, system issues, and upload issues, must be submitted via the OSP help desk at client.support@apexlogic.com. Any offers and team members experiencing SAM.gov delays, which are impacting their ability to submit their proposal, must notify the OASIS Plus CO no later than August 31st, 2023 via email to oasisplus@gsa.gov. Proposals are due no later than 4 p.m. Eastern Time on September 13th, 2023. Please monitor SAM.gov for future questions and responses and any amendments. This concludes our pre-proposal conference. We thank you for your interest and your effort. Take care.